episode if you find yourself in a business pivot and are unsure how to navigate it. Today, we are talking with Eden Strader. This conversation was so much fun to really dive into how she is navigating her current business and life pivot. Eden is a six-figure photographer turned business coach who inspires creative entrepreneurs, artists, and makers to build a life of artistic growth, wealth, and personal power. With carefully curated strategies in marketing, mindset, sales strategy, and self-care through excavating her clients' unique brand magic. This conversation, we really dive into what a pivot really is and how to navigate it with grace for yourself. Without further ado, here is Eden. Hello, Eden. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to chat. Just so if nobody knows who you are, introduce yourself. What do you do? Who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Eden Strader. I am a wedding photographer turned business coach and consultant. I have been doing photography since I was a kid, like very much my childhood passion and hobby, and was lucky enough to turn it into a career nearly a decade ago. And yeah, then a couple years ago started transitioning more into a coaching and consulting space, and my entire foundation of my business is really just to help creative entrepreneurs build beautiful businesses that lead to beautiful lives rather than just stopping at like a successful business as the end destination.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's just something that I think people are starting to figure out that there can have both, but there's been a narrative for so long that you basically either have to give your all into a business or have a fulfilling life and there's no in between. So I think it's so cool how many people are like really diving in for on the balanced base approach.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I was actually having this conversation yesterday on a podcast about how growing up, like the narrative around work was very much like living for the weekend, like nine
Yeah.
to five rules my life. Like I have to hate my job in order to earn money. Like there was such a negative connotation
Yeah.
around work. And it was very much like, let me go home and almost try to forget the day because I hate my job so bad. Like, let me zone out and only watch TV or like, let me, whatever it is. So I'm super happy that the narrative is changing. It definitely still has like a long way to go, but I think we've made like such incredible progress in like the entrepreneurial space, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to talking about the fact that you can love your job and love your life
Yeah.
and still earn really good money.
Yeah, and so did you start with a photography business first and you kinda just started to you started moving into the consulting world?
Yeah, so have been doing photography like basically my entire life. Started doing it professionally at 18, went full time at 20, and then couple years into my career I was getting like a lot of requests for like mentoring sessions or like
Yeah,
small workshops. I released like a Pinterest course and like a artificial lighting course for photographers, and then the pandemic happened and all weddings got canceled or
yeah,
rescheduled. Photography was basically taken from us. There wasn't really anything we could do anymore. I was also coming out of a divorce, so weddings were feeling a little bit
yeah,
touchier than I ever expected them to. And so that combo just led me to kind of be like, okay, like I'm starting my entire life over. And right now, my business literally physically cannot function in the way that it has for the last several years because of the
yeah.
pandemic. So, like, what is something else I love? Consulting and coaching. I've done it a little. Like, let me give this my all and see if it's something I can make into a career. And that's what we did.
Ooh, okay, I love that because it's kind of like a forced pivot, but you had to just be able to adapt, and I think it's a characteristic that kind of, like, separates the weak from, like, the people that are gonna be resilient and, like, do the thing, is when adversity strikes or, like, something crazy happens, you're able to look at what you got and say, "Okay, how can I change it all at all at once?" What did that kinda look like for you to be able to, like, come to the realization and actually be like, "Alright, this is what I have to do?"
Yeah, I mean, so I got divorced in like my divorce went through in January 2020.
Oh
That
my
month I went to LA. Yeah, perfect timing.
god.
Went to LA and found an apartment, signed for it. I was living in Utah at the time and went back to Utah, and my move-in date to LA was like the middle of March. So we all know
Naturally.
what happened then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like moved in, went straight into quarantine. This was my first time living alone since I was like 18 years
Oh,
old. I got married
yeah.
super young. I had been working I've always been self-employed since I was, like, 20 years old, and so it really was, like, this moment of just I mean, lots of therapy, lots of sitting there in my chair and just being like, "Okay, like, these are the cards that I've been dealt, and this is what I have going for me, and, like, I don't come from money, I don't, I don't have stuff to fall back on, I don't have, like, familial wealth to fall back on," so it was very much the situation of just like, "Okay, like, this is what we've got, and, like, we have to figure it out." Like, we just
Yeah.
signed a giant lease. It was the most I'd ever paid for a lease. I was coming from Utah where
Yeah.
I owned a home and my mortgage was $1,100 a month, and now I'm, like, in a big city paying over
In LA?
2,000, like
Yeah.
yeah, in LA, alone during a global pandemic, like, it just
Oh,
was so much, but
yeah.
it was also, like, a really beautiful opportunity, like, I think in moments like that where we really get wiped down to rock bottom and, like, I'm not gonna act like this was all cherries and, like, daisies at this time in my life, it was crazy, it was miserable, there was a lot of hard things going on, but at the same time, it really was this opportunity of like, okay, I can either sit here and be devastated that like I can't do my business normally, my entire life has changed, everything about my life has to be started over now, or I can be excited about it. Like,
Yeah.
this is my opportunity to completely rewrite my story. And I thought I knew what my entire life was going to look like, and that's gone now. So, like, let's get really introspective and really serious and really intentional on what we're passionate about and how we
Yeah.
wanna bring that into our lives and follow that. Like, it truly was in my case, I had no other option, but, like, there's been moments since then where, like, I've gotten much more comfortable with being like, "Something's out of alignment, like, we're changing it." Like,
Yeah.
that's what needs to be done. We
Yeah.
have to find alignment and we have to find fulfillment.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important thing as a business owner of, like, learning when pivots have to happen and when they are out of alignment, where it's like, it really is like an intuitive, just like, like something's off, like I need to figure something out here. And those are like your make or break moments. Those are the moments that you get to choose of like, all right, am I gonna like just try to like coast with this and see if it happens? Or am I really gonna make a change and see a big difference here? We are just talking on Eden's podcast about my story as well, where like we both kind of had to redesign the life that we wanted and like take a step back. Yours was more professionally, and mine was very personally. Of like, all right, like what do I want to build, and how can I handle it with the cards that you have? And it's funny to see how we both kind of had to really map that out and design something intentionally. Did that just look like a lot of brainstorming sessions for you and a lot of like, all right, what can I do right now? Or did it kind of more so like did it come to the head and you'd be like, no, this is what I'm doing?
I think, like, one of the things that I was not comfortable with before this period of my life and is something that I love now is experimentation. I think we get really hung up on needing to know what the final product is going to look like, the final image, or like we get really hung up in being like, well, what is my business going to look like a year from now, 5 years from now, 10
Yeah.
years from now? And while it is so important to have goals and to have a plan, we can sometimes lean into that a little too much and keep ourselves from discovering new possibilities or different paths of getting to our goals or different goals completely just by getting so stuck in this mindset of like there's one right way. And
Yeah.
so something that was super important to me during the pandemic and is now like a practice that I practice regularly is just trying things. Like, it was very much like, let's throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a little bit of an ego death. You definitely have to, like, get a bit of thicker skin in order to do it. It, like, really toughens you up because, like, some of it's going to fail. Like, it
Yeah.
really is.
For sure.
And no one wants to get online and be like, "Hey, I actually failed majorly. Like, this sucked. This didn't work out." Like, none of us wanna say that, but it is happening to
Yeah.
all of us
For
at
sure.
some point. Like, I have had launches that were 40K launches, and I have had launches that were $100, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like, no one wanted that.
Yeah.
Like, literally no one wanted that information, and I worked really hard on it, and that sucks. But that's okay. That's information that I get to take and pivot and analyze and figure out what did go wrong, what people didn't resonate with. And so, I think when you're feeling stuck, when you're feeling burnt out, when you're feeling like something's out of alignment, it's amazing if you know what you need to pivot into. Like, that's great. Good for you. I love that. Make that change. But it's also okay if you don't know. Like, it's all right if you don't know what the next step is. Like, I'm in a really transitional time right now in my career. I just moved. I've been doing my business for several years. I just came out of like a long period of burnout, and it is coming, the passion's coming back to me, but
Mm.
it's feeling very different than I ever did before. And I've been having to have a lot of real talks with myself and with my friends and with my family of like, it might be time to try something totally new. Like, what if I try something that isn't in the service industry? Like, what if I try a product based business or
Yeah.
a brick and mortar? Or like, what if I try this strategy I've never tried before? And like, let's see what happens. Like, it's scary, but it's exciting. Like we've talked about, and I'm, like, blurring together our last interview and this one, but, like, talking about getting to, like, choose your destiny, choose your life, and really create it. Like, sometimes you don't even know what the life is that you wanna create, and that's okay, and that's actually really exciting, and,
Yeah.
like, start to get comfortable with the idea of experimenting because you might discover something that you love so much more than you ever could have dreamed of.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I always say it like being more curious than critical because it
Mm,
comes to the point of like, you can sit there and you could say, "Oh my gosh, like I've done all of this stuff and now I've gotten to the point and I don't know if I want to keep doing it and I'm burnt out and I'm a failure and like that's going to be that." Or you can say, "No, like I've done all of this stuff. I've learned so much through your past like quote unquote failures, which really are just like teaching points of like you said, nobody wanted that information and that's okay. And now how can we take that and keep building on top of it into a new endeavor, into a new pivot, or into a new even product-based business, which is so much fun. I
mhm.
think about that all the time too. I have like millions of business ideas clonking around my head that I'm like, one day I'm going to start this product-based business once I feel solid, like once I'm like ready to take a more passive seat in my consulting and do more product based stuff. But when you say you kind of climbed out of burnout, what did your climbing out of burnout kind of look like?
I took a break. Like, I fully, which is so hard to do. Like, it really is so hard to do when you're self-employed, especially. Your business is your
Scary.
baby. You've worked so hard to build it. It's also, like, probably if you're full-time, your only income,
Yeah.
and, like, taking a break, even though I'm so grateful that I have worked hard to have, like, long-term systems and strategy that run on their own and, like, automations, I still took a sales hit. Like, I'm not going to,
Yeah.
like, lie and say my sales stayed the same when I was completely taking a break from my business. Like, absolutely not. We saw a huge dip in sales and investments, and, like, I had to be okay with that though, because it was like, this is my life. Like,
Yeah.
you spend the majority of your life at work. Like, you really do. And that isn't something that I feel like we try to stuff that fact like back in
Yeah.
our brain because like we don't want to think about it. But it's like, no, that's the reality of everyone's lives is we're
Yeah.
spending the majority at work. So I want to like it. Like, I want to have fun. I want to
Yeah.
feel aligned with it. I want to feel fulfilled by it. And powering through the burnout just was not working for me. Like, there's baby burnouts where I'm like, let me take on more creative projects or like passion projects, and like I can kind of recenter from burnout in those ways. But like, this was a deep one, like deep cut burnout. I was like, we have to take a step back.
Yeah.
And so for me, that really showed up with like online marketing and showing up online, which was really difficult to like take a break from because I've been showing up online for like nearly a decade. Like,
Yeah.
it's been so long. And so much of my life is online. I have such a close relationship with my audience and my community.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Like, we're just pausing. Like, we really are. And I didn't completely step back. Like, it's not like I didn't post for 6 months or something like that, but like, you take one scroll on my Instagram right now and you're like back in May. Like, it's been really minimal, and
Yeah.
that has been difficult, but like, it's completely reshaped the way that I can view my work. And it's
Yeah.
really given me the time to work on my personal life and
Mhm.
find what fulfills me there and find what fills my cup. Yeah, so now that I'm getting back into my business, I get to look at these things that I've discovered in my personal life and be like, what are these values? Like, these
Mm.
core values of these things that really fill me up. what are they and how can I build offerings that incorporate these same values? So, for example, like in the first half of my 20s, I was in a really horrible relationship. I was working myself overtime. Like I was super depressed and I was really private, really introverted. I've always been super introverted, like really fun and lively with my closest people, but like introverted through and through. It would take a
Yeah.
long time to get to know me. And the people that know me from like when I lived in Utah, like they met a very private, quiet person. And in the last couple years, as I've come into myself, I've pushed myself, I've gotten uncomfortable with myself, I have become so extroverted, like so extroverted. I love meeting new people. I love throwing parties. I love gathering people. I love community. I love socializing. I love all of that. And that's been a really huge thing for me. And like what I really noticed when I took a break from my work when I was feeling super burnt out is I was like, I think I'm lonely. Like I think I'm really burnt out by like not being around people all the
Yeah.
time and like not having constant connection because that is a really hard thing about being self-employed. Like for the most part, we're
100%.
home alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we're working alone. We don't have coworkers. And yes, I have coaching clients and people that I consult, but like that's a couple meetings a week. Like it really is like almost 8 hours a day that I'm alone. And so as I'm coming back into work after this break, I've really gotten into the mindset of like, okay, I'm realizing how much connection means to me, how much community means to me,
Yeah.
how much gathering people together means to me and fills me up. How can I build offerings around that? Like, how can I connect to people on a deeper level? How can I have these personal relationships with them through
Yeah.
work? And that's been really reshaping in coming back from burnout.
Oh gosh, we have so many parallels in our stories, and like where you are now is kind of where I was. And I just told my story on her podcast, but after I left California, it was very similar. Where like I took like 6 months, and it was my first time not living in a group of people, because I went to college and I always lived at my family's business with like 50 other people, and I was like literally in the middle of the woods by myself, and like my boyfriend worked all day. And I remember sitting there just being like, oh my gosh, like I am lonely. How am I going to be able to build this business sitting at home by myself, like you said, having a couple of calls a week? And then my boyfriend would come home and I would be like, "Blah, blah, 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 blah," like this is everything that happened all day. And he would be like, okay, like I was just with people all day. And dealing with loneliness as a business owner is something that is so not talked about in the beginning of your business, like getting into it, of how much of a lonely life it is. And the more successful you become, how much more lonely it is, like the higher you get in your business. And it just really is something that we need to talk about more. And we have a lot of parallels there where like I was depressed, I didn't want to see anybody, I didn't want to do anything, and then all of a sudden I realized I was lonely. And I'm an extrovert. Like I've always been an extrovert, but like I realized it is what makes me function as a person, is being surrounded by other people's energy and like being able to
Mhm.
fill my cup through my solid relationships in life. And I think it's hard to do as a business owner because our lives are so different than the average.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you said, it's not talked about that often. And it's a really weird concept because it's like, yeah, like you said, like your partners or your friends or your family, like stereotypically and very likely they are working with other
Yeah.
people during the day. And so there's this huge disconnect of like, I almost feel like a dog when its owners come home from work where you're just like, hi, 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 hi. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm so excited you're home. Like, let's talk, let's talk, let's talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm here. I've been waiting all day.
Yeah.
And so and there's only so much you can do, right? Like you can do co-working spaces or you can
Yeah.
do virtual events or what have you, but you have to be really intentional about that. And so that's been, yeah, just a huge shift for me over the last year, especially. And like I've really been playing with I turn 30 next year and
Yeah.
I've really been like kind of going back and forth on like, do I want to be a coach and consultant for the
Yeah.
rest of my life? Like, do I see myself having this be my primary income until I retire? I don't know. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know if that's in the cards for me. And so it's really opened up my eyes too to like other avenues I can take, other businesses I can start. Like, yeah, would a brick and mortar community space or
But
bar
yeah.
or coffee shop or everything in between, like fulfill me more as a human being? Like where can we go with this? Because truly the possibilities are endless. Like we always think like, oh, someone else does that, but like that's not for me.
Mhm.
And that's not the case. Like that's how you felt before you started this business. And so it's really cool when you think about it because it's like we have so many possibilities. Life is so long. I know it's also so short, but like
Yeah.
there's so much time to pivot and change and grow. And that is like one of the coolest things about being a creative entrepreneur is like you can do anything, like truly.
And that mindset I think is hard to come by to some of like, I can do anything and I'm like the ability to feel confident and like of course there's going to be failures, but confident in saying that of being like it's so special. I feel so privileged to be able to live this life of like yeah, like I know in
Mhm.
10 years I might have a totally different lifestyle than what it is now. I probably won't be living in a bus. I won't be traveling around. I'll probably be settled and my business will look different. And like that is okay. And
Mhm.
learning how to deal with that change is hard from people that like control. It's hard for people that like to plan. It's hard for people that like to be organized. I'm type A. It's just what it is.
Mhm.
But it's also there's a lot of like excitement in it. There's a lot of excitement of like, holy
Mhm.
cow, where could I be in 10 years? Like my life might
Yeah.
look totally different and it's so special.
Yeah, it's so exciting, and I feel like you even see it after, like, several years in your business because, like, there's no way it's gonna be the exact same from when you started, and, like, even when I started my business, I was like, "I'm gonna be a wedding photographer for the rest of my life." Like,
Yeah.
that's gonna be my entire life path, and so 5 years into my career to be like, "Actually, like, I need to take a break, like, I don't even know if I'm gonna come back to this," was really earth-shattering, really interesting, but it was, like, such I'm, like, getting back into it again now the passion's really come back, but, like, it was really interesting and, like, really helpful for self-discovery and, like,
Yeah.
self-growth to be like, "Oh, I can change this at any point, and it actually hinders me instead of helping me to, like, cement in stone that I have to do this thing for the rest of my life." Like, it can change at any moment.
Yeah. Gosh, that is so good. It's so relatable. And I think it's a conversation that just like there's no limit to the amount of times it needs to be had of like you really truly can make anything out of life just depending on how you choose to do it and like the actions that you take and people that stay stuck. Like sometimes I struggle to see people, whether it's my cousins or like friends from high school, that like I feel like they're in the same spot. And every time I talk to them, whether it's 3 years later, they're like, oh man, like I still feel really stuck in this spot and like I don't know what I want to do with my life. And sometimes it's like you do have to create it. And I think both of our stories are a big like testament to that. As like when people create these like really big fulfilling lives, it is intentionally created brick by brick of like we might not know, it might be very like ambiguous for a long time, who knows what's to come, but like it really is intentional. It's us having to say, okay, this is the life that I want to have. These are my values and like what aligns with those values and how can I create that? What element, because I know you do business consulting and you've run a business for a long time, what element of this like confidence in your pivots do you feel comes from like understanding business strategy and like really feeling like you know how you can run this business, or are you feeling like it is just, I will make it happen no matter what?
It's a little bit of both. I think, like, one of the things that has really been a thing for me during my 20s is, like, sticking to the areas that I know I'm good at, and, like, I
Yeah.
know the strategy and I know the growth. Like, I teach so much about, like, brand strategy and social media strategy and, like,
Mhm.
showing up as a personal soul-led business, and so, when I own, like, a design and brand agency, and when I opened that up last year, I think, that felt easier because I was like, "This is pretty adjacent to my job, it's a
Yeah.
service provider, like, I'm still in the same scope of what I do. Yes, we're gonna have a different demographic and audience, but, like, it's still within realm that I know." So, I think when you make pivots adjacent to what you're already doing, a lot of it does come down to, like, "I know how to do this, like, I've
Yeah.
done something similar before." But a big goal for me in my 30s, like, not to beat a dead horse and be redundant, but, like, is to open a brick and mortar and to probably, have it be a community space and, like, have it be a coffee shop slash bar club thing. Like,
Yeah.
it's been a lifelong dream of mine that was almost always, like, a running joke because I was like, "There's no way I could ever do that, like, who would do that?" And now that I'm approaching 30, I'm kind of like, why not me,
Yeah.
actually? Like, when I started this business, I
Same.
did not know what I was doing. Yeah, like, I'm like, when I started my business at 20 years old, I had no idea what I was doing,
Yeah.
literally no clue. And I figured it out as I went along. And like, it's the same thing with this. Like, I'm really passionate about bringing this to life. And I think a really important thing when you are feeling passionate about something and you want to bring it to life is like also giving yourself the grace to not put a time limit on it. Like,
Mhm.
one of the things that's really important to me with this new goal and this new dream is like it's going to happen when it's supposed to happen and I'm
Yeah.
not going to rush it. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to rush it. Like, the space is gonna come to me when it's supposed to, the investors are gonna come to me when they're supposed to, like, all of that is going to come like, I'm going to have to work for it, but, like, I don't need to rush this process.
Mhm.
But yeah, like, my approach to this new business and, like, this future business is more of, like, just trust and, like, trust falling into that and being like, "I will figure it out as I go along," because I have that faith in myself. I have that faith in my community to help me and uplift me and
Yeah.
push forward the project. And so it's a little bit of both, and it's okay if it leans one way or the other a little bit more. Like,
Yeah.
truly, even if you know the strategy, even if you know the techniques, even if you have the data, it all comes down to execution and confidence regardless. So, like,
Yeah.
that truly is the thing that you have to have in order to make a successful business.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That is just like so beautifully put of like creation. The confidence has to be there. It'll come to you when it's supposed to. And a lot of it really is if you force it too much, like you can't jam it into something that's not supposed to work. And so we have to try to figure
Mm-mm.
something out and trust that the creativity will come to you. This has been so wonderful. Eden, what a great conversation. Where can people find you? What's your podcast? And where can they follow along to see what's next in your journey too?
Yeah, so you can find me at Eden Strader on basically everything, just EdenStrader. That's my website. We have tons of freebies on there. Instagram as well, where we do a lot of brand building. That's like where I always tell people to go. I'm like, message me, shoot me a DM, let's be friends, let's chat about all the things. And then my podcast is called That's My Personal Business. You can find it wherever you stream. And we just talk about all things business, all things personal, all things in between. We very much talk about just the duality of our lives and the way that they integrate with each other and influence each other. And yeah, it's my baby. It's like 4 years old now, which is crazy. And it's so
No.
much fun. So definitely head over there.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. Thanks for sharing today.
Thanks so much for having me.
What a great conversation that was. Make sure that you go check out Eden's podcast. That's My Personal Business on all of the places that you're listening to podcasts. Make sure you go and check her out. Of course, all of her links will be in the show notes below. If you loved this episode, there are more hyper conversational business conversations coming on every Tuesday and Friday, as well as we have over 250 hours of business advice out there now. Make sure you subscribe. Come say hi on my Instagram at This Is Madison Page, and I will see you in the next episode.